So I'm really delighted about what you said as an introduction because we cannot have harmony without food. I think harmony begins with food. We've just enjoyed our lunch. And from time to time, it's also important to reflect on how that food is produced, where are women in the value chains, and what are the inequalities at play in that sector. So I'm from the FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, and our core business is around food security, nutrition, poverty eradication. And as we do periodically, we release some reports to just look at the status of gender into that sector. Because when you work on gender, you need baselines. You need to see if you're making progress. And if you have no baselines, you cannot measure progress. So with that introduction, I will go quickly through the report, the main findings, some of the approaches that we found work in empowering women in agri-food systems, and also a few recommendations. Okay, I'll not make the same mistake as last year. So we launched this report in April 2023, so it's quite recent. It's a few months ago. We've actually had a series of launches, not only in Rome, but in Canada, in the USA, different presentations in Nordic countries and other parts of the world. So what the report does is that it really provides quite a comprehensive status on the situation of women in agri-food systems, beyond agriculture, to look into food processing, the marketing, the consumption, so throughout all the chain. So it really looks at different structural inequalities that are related to gender, and also how different intersecting social and economic factors are at play when we talk about gender in that sector. But also, there has really been an evolution, because the previous report that we launched about 11 years ago focused on agriculture. So here we are really taking it not only beyond agriculture, but also looking at what we call the social norms, you know, the underlying factors that are beyond the agricultural sector, but which influence the status of women in the sector. And how do we promote gender transformative change, working also with men to promote social change and justice. The other key dimension is that we are also putting gender as an objective in itself. Because usually what happens is that we tend to put gender as a subset of poverty reduction or economic development, and not as an objective in itself. So here we really put gender center stage into the process of building inclusive, efficient, sustainable agri-food systems. So here is the first area of finding, is that globally 36% of working women are employed in agri-food systems compared to 38% for men. So the difference is not really much. What is important here is to see that there is somewhat a reduction in the numbers. So when you look at the women here, for instance, you see 2005 and then 2019. You see that there is a decrease in numbers between 2005 and 2019. And the same also for the men. So there's a decline in the number of people involved in agri-food systems. Could be due to mechanization and to different things, but the reduction is really in primary agricultural production. What we find also is that agri-food systems are a greater source of livelihoods for women than for men, especially in low and middle income countries, and that there are also many disparities. We talk about 36% of women overall, But when you look at some regions, it goes to 71%. So, but what we find is that women's contribution is very important. However, their working conditions are not ideal. They're really predominant in irregular, informal, part-time, low-skilled, very labor-intensive, and vulnerable forms of employment. Here is some of the data, for instance. When we look at the women in vulnerable employment, you see that 49% of women are contributing family workers. Family, they work with the family, so it means that they may not get a salary, and their work may not be visible or recognized, compared to only 17% for men. So when you look into, so that is the agriculture, when you look into the non-ag segments of agri-food systems, you would see that men, 75% of men working in that area work for a salary, compared to only 60% of women. So more men earn a salary from their agricultural work than women. So the other area of finding is about the productivity gap that, for comparable farms in terms of farms of the same size, the land productivity is lower for women than for men. We also see that women earn less for the same work. So ILO has a lot of work to do there. Also the unpaid care work, the work burden of women within the home, deprives them from more time to engage in a paying job or income-generating activities. So here, on average, for instance, women spend 4.2 hours a day on unpaid domestic and care work, compared to 1.9 hours for men, but it's not really the reality. It's a global average. If you go to my part of the world in West Africa, it's double that, the amount of unpaid work performed by women in the agri-food sector. So here, when we talk about access to assets, resources, we also see that women really lag behind in different areas, whether it's about land, the inputs, the services, the finance, the digital technology. And there are particular areas where progress has really been so slow, and those involve, for instance, the extension services, the irrigation, the ownership of livestock, where really we haven't made much progress at all. So here also, when it comes to land, land is a very important asset, not only for the production, but you also use it as a collateral to access finance. And all the countries you see here that are above the diagonal are the countries where women's land ownership is a lot lower than men's land ownership. So you see that there are really not many countries where women have greater access to land compared to men. And even where women have land rights, the protection is low. So the legal protection of women's land right is low for 50% of those countries that have done something in the area of legislation. And when we talk about gender gap in access to mobile internet in low and middle income countries, this is one of the areas where there has been progress. We should also acknowledge that. So the gender disparities have reduced. So here, again, when we talk about social norms, the behaviors, the customs, there are a number of prevailing social norms that undermine women's right to food. There are a number of countries where they have food taboos. A lady was telling me that in her community, women cannot eat the chicken, or the eggs, or, girls are denied access to nutrient-dense food because maybe the community don't want them to menstruate too early, to grow too fast. And there are many countries where people still believe that it's not good for children if the mother is working. Or where sexual-based violence is tolerated, they feel that it is okay for a husband to beat up the wife. So those are very big challenges, and unfortunately, social norms are very difficult to transform. It takes a long time over generations. So we find that also, when there are policies, they, like I said before, they really don't prioritize gender at the center. So you find a lot of gender in the problematizing, women are vulnerable, they lack this and that. But once you get into the investment plans, where the actions and the funding really takes place, it evaporates. You have total gender evaporation. So here also, when we talk about coping mechanisms, during the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, 22% of women lost their jobs in off-farm agri-food systems in the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, compared to 2% for men. So women are more vulnerable to shocks. And we also felt that food insecurity was much higher among women than men. So there was an issue. And for climate change, it was also found that even when it's really hot, the heat waves, women tend to remain on the farm working much longer than men. They don't really reduce their working hours. So some of the policy highlights are about gender transformative approach. It's not good enough to work on inclusion of women and girls in structures and systems that do not work for them. So we also have to change those systems and the structures. And that we can only do when we can change the discriminatory norms that underpin the gender entitlement systems in terms of who should own land and land of the same quality as men, or the gender division of labor, or the gendered patterns of production. You find in many countries that men are predominant in the higher, much more valuable yields where they can make more money, the export crops and so on. So we feel that closing gaps in land tenure is also really crucial, as well as access to child care, because then women can free time to go and work and earn a salary. And that group-based approaches are also very good in terms of increasing empowerment and resilience. And that social protection is also key for women's empowerment and resilience. And this will be my last slide, 3 call to action. The first one is about investment in high-quality research and data, because you need good data and analysis to inform the policies and the investment plans and the programs and the projects. Not only by gender, but there are also many intersecting factors, like the age and the social category at times, the urban-rural status. And we also have to intervene at scale. There are a number of actions, but they are projectized, smaller scale, and it's important to upscale the interventions so that we can close the asset and the resource gaps, and that from our analysis, doing that would increase the global GDP by 1% and provide food security for an additional 45 million people. And the interventions also must be intentional and focus on empowerment. So usually what we do is we always instrumentalize women, right? If you invest in women, then the economy would grow, and then this and that would happen. It shouldn't be. It's a basic human right. Women should be there in their own right, and not just because if you invest in women, you get a return on investment. So we should really increase, be more intentional, focus the programs and projects on women's empowerment, and that doing so could increase the incomes of an additional 58 million people and the resilience of an additional 235 million people worldwide. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Tacko. You wanted to show a video, right?
Yeah, there's a short video.
Almost 4 billion people rely on agri-food systems for their livelihoods.
Half of them are women prevented from realizing their potential,
Held back by inequality and discrimination,
marginalized,
and denied agency.
working in poorer conditions with lower wages, carrying a greater burden of care and unpaid work.
Women have always worked hard for agri-food systems.
It's time to make agri-food systems work better for women.
Greater equality means
Greater resilience, greater social, economic,
and environmental sustainability
empowering women and achieving gender equality,
could bring huge gains,
better agricultural production,
and child nutrition,
food security for 45 million more people,
resilience for 235 million more people,
global GDP increased by $1 trillion.
Change is within reach.
Women need more access to and control over livestock, water, and seeds.
And the land, technology, and the finance needed to grow their livelihoods. Eliminating discrimination.
Brings tangible benefits.
Intervention is essential at every level of agri-food systems.
Engaging with men and boys makes change happen faster.
Changing national policies and social norms is vital.
Ensuring that women have a greater voice in policy and decision-making.
Collecting high-quality data.
Can measure progress towards equality.
Working with groups and collective action.
Gives women greater access to technology.
And improves resilience for whole communities. It's time to make the change.